So what's your name?
Buddy Hopkins.
When were you born?
I was born in the year of 1938.
What was your parents' names?
My mother's name was Mary Ann Hopkins, and my father's name was Fred Dennis Hopkins.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I had 6 siblings, and 3 of them has passed away now. And then there's 2 sisters and myself still living. One in Missouri and one in Arkansas. And I had my oldest sister passed away first, and she had cancer. And then I had my middle brother under me. He had a brain aneurysm, and it caused him to pass away. And then my baby brother, Vernon, he served in the United States Army, and so he pulled 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. And while he was in Vietnam, he contracted this disease from a chemical they used while in Vietnam. It was called Agent Orange. And due to that, he got the Agent Orange, and it ate 3 holes into the back of his heart. And then he died about 5 years ago. And
so before all this happened, how was your early childhood?
Well, I went to a little school when I started in 1st grade. It was a little 2-room school, and one room was called the little room, and the other one was called the big room. And for grades 1 to 3 was in the little room, and in the big rooms was 4 to 6. And then after that, I went to after that I went to Virgie Middle School, which was the 7th and 8th grade. And then I graduated from the middle school, and then I went into high school, which was on the same campus as the elementary school. And then I graduated from Virgie High School.
So before this, what all did you guys do for fun? What'd you kids do for fun?
Oh, well, as a young child, we had a group of young boys that lived around in my area, and we had several games that we played that we concocted up on our own, and we would always end up on Sunday afternoon. We would, when the weather permitted, we had a big creek or whatever that ran down the back of our house there, and so we'd always go there and go swimming. And we tied a big old car tire to a rope that hung from a tree over the water, and we would swing out as far as we could and then drop off of that into the water.
Besides that kind of game in the water, what else did you play?
We had a game that we called kicking the cans, and that basically was like a hide and seek game. where we stacked 4 cans up, and then everybody, while this guy was stacking the cans up, then everybody else would run and hide, and then we would have one of the young kids would come in, and while he was out looking, trying to find the people that hid, somebody would sneak in and kick the cans over, and then then the guy that was would have to come back in and restack the cans before he could go look for anyone. And then that just kept proceeding till the guy that was caught everybody. And most of the time, he never could find them.
What kind of chores did you guys do around the house?
Oh, I would do on the weekend. I would have to go and help hoe corn. We would hoe an acre of corn on the Saturdays, and then in the evening we had gardening to take care of because my father raised a pretty good sized garden. We had about every type of vegetable that you could think of.
So, after you graduated your high school education, what'd you do after that?
I left immediately after we graduated in May, and then I left and I went into the Air Force.
Did you have any expectations for when you went into the Air Force on what you wanted to do?
Basically, you went into basic training, and we served 16 weeks in basic training, and we had a lot of different things that we had to learn. Discipline. We had to learn behavioral patterns, how to behave and how to act as a gentleman.
What kind of field training did you have?
We would go out on field maneuvers, and we would take our backpack and we would hike probably 3 or 4 miles out in the desert. Since this was being in San Antonio, Texas, it was a hot time, and so we would stay out there. Sometimes we would stay out 4, 5, 6 days at a time, and we lived in pup tents and slept under the stars.
Okay.
And so then we did our rifle training or whatever while we were out in them maneuvers. They had them set up to where we had to do 3 or 4 different positions of learning how to fire a rifle, and then to make ourselves useful with using a rifle and how to use a rifle in combat.
So after basic training, what bases did you go to?
Well, when I left basic training, I graduated from basic training. Then I got a 30-day leave. I went home to my mother and father's in El Paso. And then I left there and went to Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois, which was a base where they had different schools and they trained for different areas in the service. And I went into in-flight refueling, which we refueled aircraft in the air, and I laid in the tail end of the aircraft, and I had a big boom that I had to lower down to put it in the nose of a B-47 bomber in order to refuel it in the air.
So what'd you do after you started refueling the planes?
Okay, after I left Chinook, after I graduated from my schooling there, I was sent to a base in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Then our group left and we went to Korea, where we basically, at the end of the Korean War, to what our job was, we was there to more or less to clean up different areas there that were attacked by bombs. So we had to do a lot of refueling in the air to keep the bombers going, because they still had people that just, the Koreans that resisted, did not want the war to end. They had it that they wanted to annihilate the Americans. So I was there for about 6 or 8 months in Korea, and then from there I went to a base in Germany, and we stayed there for about 2 weeks, and that was for some debriefing and stuff. And then we were sent back to our home base in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And then basically our pay grade and our field in in-flight refueling was frozen. So then they switched a whole group of us into different fields. They opened it up to where we could go into different fields. I chose to go into special services, where in special services was one group where we had music, where we played music in the Air Force Tops and Blues. I was in a group called Dick Chapman and the Happy Rhythm Boys, and we played music throughout the United States in different air bases and USO clubs. And then we were sent to Europe and Asia, and we went to different bases over there, and we played at the USO clubs for our airmen and the NCO officers and the CO officers. And then I spent a few months over there traveling and doing that, and then I was sent back home to my home base in Lake Charles. And then after we had been back home in I'm going to say 6 weeks to 2 months, then they decided to move our bombardment wing that we were in, which was SAC, which was the Strategic Air Command. They moved us to a base they had opened up in Indiana. It was called Bunker Hill Air Force Base. And then there I continued to play music for a while, and then it got up close to my tour of time in the Air Force. I was then discharged, and then I got to go home.
Okay, so before you moved to Indiana's base, did you meet anybody at Louisiana while you were there?
Yes, I met this young lady. She was a Creole, Cajun girl. We started dating, and we had dated for approximately 6 to 8 months, and then things got serious between us. So I then proposed to her, and then about a month before we were supposed to get married, this hurricane came into the picture, and it got to be a really severe hurricane. This was in 1957, I think. I don't remember the name right now of that hurricane that happened. But anyway, this young lady that I was engaged to, while this hurricane hit, we had to evacuate our base, and we had to send most of the people to a small base in Texas. And then in the meantime, there was a bunch of us that had to stay to the base to help clean it and shut things down as this hurricane hit. And then after this hurricane passed through, I left, I lost communications with this young lady that I was engaged to, and we could not find her. And then I found one of her family members, and they told me that she was killed in the hurricane, and that brought great sadness to my heart, since that was really basically my first love.
Okay. So after you were discharged from the Air Force and went back home, what did you do while you were at home?
Well, I moved back to my mother and father's, and I was there for a few weeks, and then I decided that I wanted to further some education, so I went to college in New Mexico. I went to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, and I spent 2.5 years going to college there. And then after I finished the courses that I needed to take, then I moved back home to my mother and father's. So I stayed there for a few weeks trying to get a job, which was very hard at that time. So then I contacted my mother's brother, which was my uncle. He lived in Barberton, Ohio. I contacted him, and he told me to come there and that he would help me to find a job.
So when you went there, what kind of job did you find?
Well, we searched and searched, and then I finally found a job that I could do in upholstery and furniture. And then I worked that job for probably 3 or 4 years. And then this big plant opened up in Twinsburg, Ohio, which was Chrysler Corporation. I applied for a job there and was accepted.
Okay, so what kind of job did you get when you went into Chrysler?
Well, the first job I had at Chrysler was a regular line worker, which basically most people starts out there if you're just a general laborer. And then I worked for there in doing that job for a few years, and then I learned to get some training into other fields while there, and then I went into a what we call a checker, where you check and count each item that was loading into box cars and into semi-trailers.
So after that job, did you apply for any more jobs?
Yes, I left that job and I applied to the paint shop we had there. And so I had to start out as an apprentice. So I served 3.5 years in the paint shop as an apprentice painter. And then I got my journeyman's card. And then I continued to work as a journeyman painter for the next 5 or 6 years.
Did you have any other jobs?
Yes. I felt that this job in the paint shop, we had to deal with a lot of chemicals where we had to mix our paint and cleaning chemicals that we had to use, and they were really getting to be make you very nausea. So I talked to my supervisor about applying for another job that was I really liked, and that was a crane operator.
What kind of stuff did you do with the cranes?
Well, I spent probably 2 years learning the crane, because in the crane operator, with the severity of that job, being working so close with other people when we had to lift and move dies that weighed anywhere 500,000 to 600,000 pounds apiece, we had to do a lot of training because we had to be certified by the state of Ohio, and we had to go to a board to where they did a lot of questioning us and asked questions about that. And then I got my crane operator's license, and then from there I spent quite a few years being a crane operator, which I really loved.
In those years, did you meet anybody during that period?
Yes, when I was in there, I met this lady, and we dated for a period of time, and then we got married, and we had 3 children.
So what were the children's names?
My oldest child, his name was Christopher. And then the second oldest was Timothy Wayne. And then Heather was the baby girl in the family. And so I continued to work at Chrysler at that time while they were growing up and going to school. And then the oldest son, he moved out on his own and got himself a job. And then my son signed up to go into the Marines. So my wife and I at the time then, she decided that she would like to have a divorce and she wanted to move on, that she had met somebody else. So that was very saddening to me, because when I married, I expected it to be for lifetime. But as I've learned, a lot of things is not forever. So
So after the divorce, what did you do?
Well, my son, Timothy, it was time for him to leave to go to the Marines. He had 3 weeks to go, and then a great friend of mine that I worked alongside in Chrysler, he asked me to come down here and to bring Timmy down before he left to go to Chrysler, and that his youngest son was graduating and he was throwing a party for him. So my son and I accepted the invitation, and we came to North Carolina.
So how is North Carolina different from where you've lived in Ohio?
In North Carolina, people are really laid back, and they're so peaceful with themselves, and they are not quite the hustle and bustle like it was in Ohio.
So how has North Carolina changed as you've lived here? Has it changed any?
Well, not really changed too much, except I got older. And then when I came down here, I met my first wife, and I had already been divorced for about 3 years when my son left to go into the Air Force, or into the Marines. And then while I was here on vacation for that week, I met a nice young lady.
What was her name?
Her name was Violet Baker.
How did you meet Violet?
Well, like I said, we came down here for this graduation party that her father was throwing for her youngest brother. And then when we first met at that party that night, she was with another young man that worked at Broy Hill Furniture Industries where Violet worked. And Violet worked there for a lot of years as a manager at the Harper plant. Well, in the meantime, while at the party, I asked her to dance with me. We had a music playing and everything, and so I asked her to dance, and she refused me and wouldn't dance with me. I mean, she acted really stuck up, and so I never could get her to talk to me any that night. So I danced with a couple dances with her mother, and I asked her mother if she could, I could get to dance with that young lady. And she, in the meantime, I didn't know that was her daughter. And she told me, and I asked her a couple of questions, and she reminded me, she said, "Now that's my daughter you're talking about." So in the days to come, I had to go back to Ohio because I had to return to work. And then I kept thinking a lot about her because she was absolutely drop dead gorgeous. So I called her mother up, and I asked her mother if she would give me Violet's phone number. And she hesitated there for a little bit, and then she finally gave it to me. So it took me 2 or 3 days to get up the nerve to call her and talk to her. So I called her 3 or 4 days later for the first time, and we spent like 4 hours talking on the phone that one first time we talked to each other.
Did Violet have any children?
Yes, she was married also before, and she had 4 children.
What were their names?
Her oldest son's name was Von, and then second oldest was Robert, and then there was Tina Marie, and then there was Mary Renee, and that was Mary Renee is Garrett's mother.
So, did you ever see Violet again?
Yes. I spent the whole next year dating her. Actually 14 months we spent dating, and we became really close, and I traveled from Ohio to North Carolina. In that 14 months I traveled every weekend but one. And that weekend, her and her daughter Renee came to Ohio to see me. And then we got really close. And then on a Thanksgiving weekend in 1988, I think it was, we went out to dinner that weekend, and she took me to Woodlands up in Blowing Rock, and while we were having our dinner, to her surprise, I reached in my pocket and got down on my knee, and I gave her this ring, or offered her this ring, and asked her if she would accept the ring and marry me. And she said yes, but you've also got to ask my father. So 2 days later, I went over to her mother and father's house, which they lived right beside of Violet. So I went over and had a talk with Robert, and I asked him if I could have his daughter's hand in marriage. And then he goes on to give me a long story of things I should and shouldn't do. And so I agreed with most all of them, and then I agreed to most everything, and then I went back to Ohio, and then we kept talking for a few days about what we needed to do to make arrangements for our wedding. So we did a lot of planning in the next month, and then in the 3rd week of June, I think it was, of 88 or 89, that was, she moved to Ohio. And she stayed there with her first cousin and her husband until our wedding date, which we were married on July the 1st of 1989. And then Violet and I, we lived in Ohio for about 3 years. And then I went to my personnel office, and I was talking to our personnel manager about what I had to do and if I was eligible, and to where I was close to retire, because Renee and Violet both wanted to move back home to North Carolina. So I talked to my personnel manager on and off for the next couple of weeks, And then he called me in and told me what I had to do. And so I had to bring Violet in to the personnel office, and we had to sit and talk to the personnel manager and to a couple of other people there. And they both told me that I had the time, because at Chrysler, if you worked 30 years, you could retire regardless of what your age was. So I qualified. I had my 30 years. So I then accepted the retirement, and then I had to go through some different processes to get everything set up for my retirement. So then I think it was in the year of 1990 or 91, we decided to move back to North Carolina. And so we moved back here, and we found us a place to live, and then we bought our own place. And then in the meantime, her daughter Renee was in school, and she started dating this young man, which was an awesome young man. So when she graduated from high school, a year or so after that, Renee and Randy Pennell, they got married, and they both worked. Well, in the meantime, they had this young son, this young boy, which is my interviewer in this interview here, Garrett Pennell, and he was my pride and joy.
What'd we do together?
Well, when you were a baby, you and I had bonded so close with each other. Renee worked every day, and her husband Randy, he worked every day. So Renee didn't know what to do whenever you were born to keep it, because she didn't trust to let nobody else watch her child. So then I stepped up and asked her if she would like for me to watch Garrett while they both worked. So she agreed to do that. And then my wife, Violet, she worked every day, so I had Garrett here at home with me every day, and which was a blessing. When he was a baby, he got up to be about a year and a half old, 2 years, and I'd go to put him down for his naps when it come around noontime, and he would not lay down in that bed and go to sleep for nobody. He had to have his little cars and his little trucks when I put him in the bed, and then I had to lay down in that bed with him to try to get him to go to sleep. Well, I played with him with his little cars and trucks. He run them cars and trucks all over my belly, my shoulders, across my head, down my legs. He made roads everywhere on me. So I would finally, to try to get him to go to sleep, I would roll over on my side with my face away from him to where he couldn't see me, and I pretended that I was asleep. So he would continue on playing with his little cars and things, and then he got up and sat down on my head and just bounced. I didn't know what to do. I just lay there and let him do it. And then he got off of the head and went and straddled across my shoulder, and he would lean over and take his little hands. He would take one hand and put on my eyelid and one on the bottom of my eye, and he would pry my eyes open to see if I was awake. And it took everything I had to keep from busting out laughing, because I still pretended I was asleep. Now this went on for a few years, 2 or 3, 4 years. This went on like that. And then he got up to where he was preschool age.
Where'd you take him?
Well, Garrett started preschool, so his mother would take him to school in the morning, and then he was only going a half a day. So my wife and I, when days she was here, she worked a different shift. Her and I both would go pick Garrett up, and then most of the time it was me picking him up. And then he went into kindergarten school, and he started kindergarten at Baton. And so I think he went to 5 years of school there at Baton. And so his mother and father, they would take turns and dropping him off at school in the morning. And then I would have to pick him up every evening and bring him to my house and keep him. And then when he graduated from Baton, he started going to middle school in Collettsville. And then at that time, his mother, after on her first year at Collettsville, she quit work. So she started to taking him to school every morning and picking him up. And that absolutely broke my heart that I didn't get to do that no more. So as he grew up, as he was growing up, Garrett and I would go fishing. And then we would ride we went out one day and was going towards Hickory on 321, and Garrett seen this four-wheeler sitting in this four-wheel shop there on 321, and he decided he wanted a four-wheeler. So on the way back from Hickory, Garrett and my wife and I, we stopped at this four-wheeler shop, and we looked at this four-wheeler, and when we left there, I guess and Garrett was the proud owner of a good-sized Honda four-wheeler. So we spent our summers riding the four-wheeler and riding trails. I had made probably 4 or 5 miles of trails on our cousin's land across the road, and on his great-grandmother and grandfather's place, made trails, and then on mine, which we all live here in a circle. And we did a lot of fishing and riding. And there was something that I did leave out that I would like to tell you about Garrett when he was probably 5 or 6 years old. Most kids would love to spend time at Toys R Us. So there was never a weekend that went by that we did not buy him some kind of a toy or whatever for him. But the funny thing was, we offered to take him to Toys R Us quite a few times, and he declined. He did not want to go there. the only place he wanted to go was Home Depot. He was nuts about riding tractors and lawnmowers. So every time we go to Hickory, we had to go to Home Depot so he could sit and ride, or just mostly sit, and pretending that he was driving the lawnmowers and stuff. And then as he got older, then we progressed, like I said, into riding four-wheelers. And he did a lot of riding my lawnmower that I had to mow 1.5 acres a yard with him sitting in my lap, because he loved to ride lawnmowers. And then as he got older, then it progressed into four-wheelers. And then as he got into his middle grade, close to his last year at Collegeville, he had his mother to go buy him a four-wheeler. So Garrett and I, then we rode four-wheelers all over around here, and I had to teach him how to ride one the proper way and not to be dangerous, because they can kill you. So we spent that. Now he was left Collegeville School, and then his beginning of his year, he went to Caldwell Early College, which my wife and I are so very proud of him. He has turned into one of the most finest young men that anyone could ever have in their life. So this year, his first year, he brings his paper home and he says, Paul, he says, I want to do an interview on your life. And boy, did I ever have I don't know what you would call it, but I stopped and thought about it for a while. I read the papers over that I had to sign, and then I agreed. So today we are sitting here doing this interview. So I'm going to close this interview, and it has been fun. A lot of memories that I've put on this recorder, and I'm sure there was a lot that I can't remember about. Being 75 years old, you forget a few things. So I'm going to end this interview, and I say thank you, Garrett, for allowing me to do this.